What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 3 of Mets Off Day Live. I'm your host, Michelle Margaux. We are joined by former Mets manager and now turned podcast host, Terry Collins, and of course, our esteemed SNY MLB insider, Andy Martino. What's up, guys?
Hi, Michelle. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Terry. I'm doing fine. I just can't believe that Terry Collins, of all people, has turned into the tech guy of us. He spends all his time in that chair recording for one internet project or another. Terry, did you see this coming?
I guarantee you that's not true, Andy. I can tell.
Would you call yourself an online social media influencer at this point, Terry?
No, not even close.
Are we going to address the elephant in the room here with Andy just not getting the purple memo? Or
that's true.
About that. I'm a little concerned about. He just wanted to show off his vest.
Yeah,
it's my SNY Christmas gift.
That.
That's right. It's my SNY vest, but I did not get. When Terry and Michelle chatted about color coordination this morning, they left me out of the group text, so I'm a little offended by that.
It was intentional.
Sure it was.
So let's obviously talk some baseball here. That's what this is all about. Mets coming off a 6-game road trip, turned 5-game road trip because of that rain out in St. Louis. Let's take a look back at how it went.
And he socks one to deep left field, and Randy Arozarena has broken out. 0-2 from Adam. And he goes down swinging, and the ball game comes to an end.
This is 3-2 delivery. The runners go. Breaking ball misses low. It's 2-1 Tampa Bay.
To Randy Arozarena. And a high fly ball out to left field. Nimmo back to the warning track at the wall. It's out of here. And he lines one to center field. Bader cutting across, dives, can't get it. And that's going to win the game for the Rays. And Nimmo launches one to deep right. Forget that. That is way out of here. Guys are taunting now. Nimmo uncorks one to deep center field. Back goes Ciani at the wall. It's out of here. Brandon Nimmo strikes again. Again, the 1-2. He struck him out, and the ball game is over. Adam Ottavino bends but does not break in the ninth.
All right, so they go 2-3, and we never will know what they would have done in that game 3 in St. Louis. But Terry and then Andy, what was your biggest takeaway from these two series in Tampa Bay and St. Louis?
Well, I'll tell you, I think one of the biggest takeaways is having Lindor get hot. I mean, he's such an important part of the lineup. Brandon Nimmo's I had a great series in St. Louis, but I'm telling you, get in the middle of that lineup, getting the fact that, Francisco's starting to swing the bat, especially from the left side, I think is a huge takeaway. And again, you're playing a good team. The Rays, even though they're off to a little bit slower start, but they're still a very, very good team. And to go in there, and have some tough luck, that's just part of the early season woes that every team goes through once in a while. So I just think the offense is starting to click, and I think you're going to see a big change as the season goes on.
Yeah, I certainly agree with all that. And I would just say, general takeaway with the Mets right now, sometimes it's painful for fans watching 500 caliber baseball, but this is what the Mets projected to be. I think they're in some ways right on track with the team they were supposed to be, which is going to put them in that wild card race, even if it doesn't always look dominant. I think that the Pete Alonso, what looked like it might have been a breakout, was a positive for the Mets at the end of the trip. I'm not worried about him as an offensive player, just too much talent, too much of a track record. If there's a couple things on the slightly more concerning end of things, I would say that the relievers and the pitching staff in particular, but the relievers really struggling to hold runners on is becoming a significant issue. The Rays really took advantage of that, stealing third base a ton of times. And that's something those are one of those little things that really is going to catch up with the team over the course of a season. And I'm not sure how you fix that mid-season. These are veteran players who don't do that. So there's that. And then there's just the continuum of Edwin Diaz looking really good, but not quite on his game in terms of velocity, in terms of the life on his pitches. So that continues to be something to watch too. And then, of course, Christian Scott's dynamic debut. So those are the things kind of on my mind from the road trip.
Yeah, that was fun to watch it, and he'll make his Citi Field debut this Saturday. But we always take a look at on this show on what the players did on their last off day. So Jeff McNeil on the last off day promoted his charity poker event with Hank Azaria, which actually happens to be tonight. And then Pete Alonso hit up the Dead Rabbit Pub. And then Drew Smith, Brandon Nimmo, and Sean Manaea attended the Islanders game which now the Islanders are out. But Andy and then Terry, in honor of Jeff's poker tournament tonight, I want you to give me 3 current or former Mets that you would want to play poker with. Terry, I'm sure you probably played poker with a couple former Mets, but Andy first. Who are your 3?
It's an interesting one on the spot. I'm not a good card player. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, so I don't know. I don't have a great poker face, so any of them would beat me. So I would just go with guys that would be fun to hang out with. You know who was a good card player? Remember when the Mets played some exhibition games in Vegas? Was Dan Worthen, Terry's ex-pitching coach. So he'd be a fun guy to play with. I'm sure he'd beat me. I don't know if you play, Terry, but that'd be a fun card table. How about me, you, Worthen, and throw in David Wright because he's always a fun guy to hang with. But there you go. There's a table for you.
That'd be a table, Andy, and I'm not a good card player either. I don't play any poker. Number one, I worked too hard to get where I got. I don't want to throw my money away to these guys because,
right?
First of all, they're going to outbid you on the pot. So that's part of the card game. I've walked to the back of that plane several times and watched these guys play cards, and there's some pretty good card players in there. And I'll tell you, David Wright was one of them. He was a good card player. There was a couple guys. Curtis Granderson was a good card player. So, but I stayed away from those kind of things. I didn't want to win all the money and get them mad at me. So I stayed out of it.
That's smart.
So did you give us 3?
Well, I'd probably take. I'll tell you, I'd take Michael Kadire because he's a magician with cards, so you got to play with him because you never know what kind of cards he's going to pull out of his sleeve. He'd be one, Andy'd be one, and David Wright would be one. That'd be a good table.
There you go.
Love it. All right. So today is May 9th, which means we are 29 days away from my birthday, but that's not why I'm bringing this up. It's actually Billy Joel's birthday today, and he famously played the final concerts at Shea Stadium in 2008 before its demolition. So, Andy, what is the best concert that you ever went to at Shea or even at City?
Best concert I've never been to a concert at either. All I do is work. I saw Paul McCartney at Yankee Stadium. That was one, but if I could have gone to one show in the history of either ballpark, I think the answer is obvious. It's the Beatles at Shea, that historic concert in 1965. But I'm going to see Green Day there this year. I'm looking forward to that, but I've never been to a concert at City or Shea.
Terry, have you?
I have not, but I will tell you, Michelle, today would have been my mother's 100th birthday.
Wow.
Would have been her birthday today had she still be alive. But so we're, as a family, I have my 2 sisters that are here, so we kind of, we're going to go out tonight and have dinner and toast my mom on her birthday. So, but I have not been to any concerts. All the concerts we had after those games, after the games at Citi Field, I got out. I didn't want to get mixed up in the crowd. I wanted to get home, get rested up because I had another day of work the next day. So. And I'm not a huge concert goer, probably, just the amount of people at those things. But one of the best concerts I ever saw was Chicago. Of course, you guys are way too young to understand, remember Chicago. So I saw them years and years ago, but I'd love to see them again.
Don't put Andy
That's a good one.
Bracket.
Say again, Michelle.
I said, don't put Andy and me in the same age bracket. You guys are
well, now. I wish I hadn't asked to follow up to hear that because, it's true, but not something I like to be reminded of. I'm getting old, too. I would say, well, happy birthday, first of all, to Mrs. Collins. That's quite a milestone. The one baseball concert, post-game concert I remember in Pittsburgh, Terry was managing at this time. Huey Lewis and the News played on the field after a Mets game, and I'm in the press box writing, and I'm enjoying it, these 80s hits. But talk about being old. At the end, Huey plays The Power of Love, which is one of his big hits from Back to the Future. And when he's done with playing that, he had to be given an oxygen mask and taken off the stage. Huey couldn't do it anymore. He was too old.
Wow. All right. So at this point in the season, Mets are playing 500 baseball, which was to be expected. They've looked really good at times, and then they've looked not so good at times. So, Andy, what do you think Steve Cohen and the organization feels about this team right now?
They know what they built. They know what they have. And one thing I noticed last season when the Mets, after they sold at the deadline and things were pretty ugly, is that Steve Cohen has an ability to take the long view and be like, hey, this isn't always the greatest baseball we've ever seen. But there's a strategy, there's a plan in place. I know how much Cohen right now trusts David Stearns. They're in an early period of their relationship, which is very, very positive. Obviously, they expect it to remain that way. But right now, Cohen's thinking, hey, now we're seeing what we projected. I mean, look, internally, before the season, I remember someone from the Mets telling me their internal numbers projected they were like an 84, 85 win team. And that's what they're playing like right now. So I think that that's probably something that they're comfortable with.
That's great insight. And Terry, how do you keep the clubhouse together when you go through such high highs and then such low lows in a season like this?
Well, there's two things, Michelle, for me. Number one, as the manager, you can't panic. The one thing the players respond to is how the manager handles certain things. And you've got to be the same guy every day, especially it's May. You've got a long, long way to go. So continue to try to make sure everybody understands that there's a role. Everybody's got a role in what your expectations are with each guy. And this is also where the veterans step in. This is where the veterans that said, hey, we've been here before. We've been in these situations before. And they kind of can lead the pack. You know, you're looking at all the young players you got with the Beatties and, Vientos. And now you've got the young pitching staff, some of those young pitchers coming up. But you're going to turn to these veterans to make sure that clubhouse still is no matter what's going on, is the same steady, don't get too high when we're winning, don't get too low when we're losing attitude.
Andy, I know that you and I have talked a little bit about this, and I know that it's too early to talk about whether or not Pete Alonso is going to resign in the offseason, but could you see a world in which he's traded by the deadline?
Yes, because Stearns is going to explore all possibilities, and you never know what another team is going to offer. If a team is desperate for a bat, if the Mets don't feel that they're in it at that point. But I do not think that this is a likely scenario at this point, because as a 500 team, that's not someone in the current wildcard era that should be a seller. And I think that trading Alonso would be such a franchise-altering decision. It becomes harder to re-sign somebody. It's happened before, but once they're gone, then sort of the cord is cut in a way, emotionally, and they know what it's like to be elsewhere. So I think it's such a huge decision, and the Mets are just playing too well right now to entertain that. But if the season really goes down in another direction in June, like it did last year, it would be the responsible thing for Stearns to think about it. But I wouldn't say right now I expect it.
Well, Terry, Andy makes a really good point. I mean, the chances are low, but if he is moved, how much would that deter him from re-signing? And like Andy said, it's happened before. Aroldis Chapman did it with the Yankees in 2016.
Well, I know one thing. I'm sure Pete has made it public that he wants to be a Met forever and ever. So if they happen to make a decision at the end of July that, hey, we don't think we're playoff bound, he's going to bring us a huge piece back. You know what? He's also a professional. He's also knows that it's part of the game. I mean, we've seen it before. I saw the Yankees trade Aroldis Chapman and sign him back. So you have to understand some of that stuff's part of the game. But I know Pete's agent very, very well. And at the end of the day, he's going to go on that market, and the New York Mets are going to make a huge effort to make sure Pete Alonso comes back to New York. So again, it's all part of the game. It's all part of the business. And I hope Pete doesn't take it personally, which he should not.
Yeah, I would imagine that he doesn't. I would also imagine, Andy, that all 30 teams would be in on him. But who specifically do you think would be interested if he does get to free agency?
Yeah, to me, Michelle, Pete Alonso is a guy who is more valuable to the Mets than to anybody else. Obviously, a guy who has a chance to break every Met offensive record if he stays, a chance to hit 500 home runs in the Met uniform. I don't know if this is a Hall of Fame player, but I know he has Hall of Fame power tool. So we'll see how many home runs he hits and where that goes. And I think that's a match that fits. When I look around the league and see where else at the price point that he and Scott Boras are probably going to be looking for, I don't see a ton of fits. Now, things can emerge. Like, for example, the Astros have sent Jose Abreu back down to spring training complex, and they may be looking for a first baseman in the future. Jim Crane is an ambitious owner. Could that be a place? The Cubs have had interest in Alonso as a trade partner in the past, but now Michael Busch has emerged. Yankees will be looking for a first baseman after Anthony Rizzo, but they would really like left-handed power in a perfect world in that spot. And the Yankees also like more of a defender at first base if they can get that. So anyway, the Dodgers have Freddie Freeman locked in. So when you really look at it and you go around the league, I don't see a whole lot of spots. that, or any spots that fit him better than the Mets do. And I think that works in the Mets' favor.
Terry, a topic amongst all New York fans is the potential of Juan Soto. So if would Pete being out mean Juan Soto potentially being in, you think?
Well, obviously, money's going to be huge for Soto. I mean, huge. So, and I don't know what Steven would think about trying to get both of them. I think that'd be a huge investment. But yeah, if Pete happens to say he's going to go elsewhere, obviously you got to make a run at Juan Soto. I mean, I don't care what his price tag is going to be. If because Pete Alonso, and I remember last year when we were talking about Pete Alonso, people were saying, oh, he's going to get Freddie Freeman money or Matt Olson money. He's going to get a lot more than that. Make no mistake about it. And so, if he leaves, if you try to sign him at the numbers he's going to ask, you're going to make another. If you can't get him, you've got to make a run at Soto.
Say one more thing about that, Soto, Michelle, if you don't mind. I was at Yankee Stadium covering the Yankee game last night. Wrote a column about Soto and the show that he puts on here. I was down at the concourse when he was hitting, and one of his at bats. I decided, what's the vibe on down here out of the press box? I went down and people were stopping what they were doing. They were standing frozen, like watching every pitch. Soto, videos of him around the scoreboard. Everyone's going nuts. He had a home run. He banked 440 feet to the back of the bullpen in left field. My point is, he's such a fit here, and he's entertaining the Yankee fans so much that this franchise that he's with currently right now cannot let him go. If you're the Yankees, close the doors. Go out of business. Stop being the Yankees if you don't re-sign Juan Soto, and that's what the Mets will be able to make just as much of an offer, if not more, as the Steinbrenner family will. But the Yankees can't let him go anywhere, especially across town. It's too perfect for them, and that's another piece of the context there.
Absolutely. Also great reporting, the fact that you went in and saw that fan perspective. I love that. Switching gears here, the Mets may be falling behind in the division race, but they are still very much in the NL wildcard race. So we are going to take a look at each team in the NL wildcard hunt and tell you whether or not you should be worried in a new segment that we call So-So or Scary with Martino and Terry. And I cannot take credit for that creative credit, but I do love it. So we're going to start with the Nationals. Terry, what do you think, So-So or Scary?
No, they're so-so. I mean, I think again, Michelle, if you're talking about any playoff chances at all, there are teams you have to beat. And so for the Mets, they've got to beat the lower division. I mean, they got to beat the Marlins, they got to beat the Nationals. I mean, they're gonna win some games against the other two teams because they've already shown they're good. They played the Braves in Atlanta and won the series. So I think that you got, even though every team's a big league team, I don't think the Nationals are a playoff caliber club.
Andy, what about the Padres?
First of all, Wes, I remember when the Mets won the 2015 National League pennant, and you said, Terry, this is all right, but I want to play one day So-So or Scary with Martino and Terry. That would be living the dream. So here we are. The Padres, yeah, look, the Padres are a potential playoff team. They've never been able to get over the hump past that, really, and there's something that doesn't gel there year in and year out with all the talent that they collect. But in terms of a wild card race, yeah, that's a team that the Mets should be a little bit scared of.
All right, Terry, what about the Cubs?
Yeah, I think you have to be a little scary with the Cubs. I mean, they've done a good job putting, with Bellinger back in the lineup, but they've, some of their younger players have really stepped up and played well. Warner, the shortstops, really played well. The third baseman obviously tore up the Mets here in New York. The pitching staff, Imanaga has really pitched well. They're to me, because of the division, they're scary.
And what about the Brewers, Andy?
For some reason, they're scary. It seemed like they were going into a down year. They lost their star manager. They traded Corbin Burns. It seemed like a reboot kind of time for them. But David Stearns and his group there, the guys that are still there, did such a good job of run prevention and arms and defense, and they are still more than competitive. So, yeah, in the wild card race for sure.
All right. Thanks for playing So-So or Scary with Martino and Terry.
So they're scary. They're scary. Excuse me.
Scary.
I didn't say it.
Okay, so earlier this week, we released our debut Mets at Home with Katya and Francisco Lindor, which was basically just an inside look at their family through the eyes of his wife, Katya. So we're going to show you a snippet here. Every time that Francisco is on the on-deck circle, he always looks up to you guys and does a little wave. How did that come about? Because it seems like it's every at-bat.
It is. It's every at-bat. I feel guilty if I make it late to the games because there's a few at-bats that he looks up and I'm not there. So I always try to be there at the beginning of the game for his very first at-bat. That's just something he does. He likes finding his people in the stands if his family's there, when we're there, even if we're on the road. To me, it's incredible that at other visiting stadiums, he finds us in the stands, and he does it anyways. He likes knowing that we're there.
All right, so since sitting out with an illness, Francisco Lindor, Terry, you alluded to it earlier, has a .292 batting average with a home run and 9 RBIs. And Andy, you wrote an article about how much pride Lindor takes in showing up every day, playing every day, and that was timely with his incredible flu game. But what does he do behind the scenes that allows him to take the field day in and day out?
Yeah, well, that column I wrote came from he has the game-winning hit when he's, by his own description, about to do number 2 at shortstop. So I think I said to him after the game that day, I say, I would have taken the day. Good for you. But the way you're describing feeling, and he's like, no. He got actually a little serious. He's like, no, I take too much pride in this. And I think because Lindor doesn't really come off as the typical tough guy, just his personal style, and he's not big and he smiles and all that superficial stuff. I think it's easy to forget how tough he is. He's played with a broken finger for the Mets. He's played through an elbow injury with bone chips all last year, had surgery at the end of the year, played sick last week. What does he do behind the scenes? I think he's somebody who just really puts himself in a position to be ready to play and post up, and that's really important to him. And that has so much value. You could have the most talented player in the league that doesn't post up, and what is that really worth if they're not playing regularly? So that's big for him. And I just think what you saw when you went in, such a great job, Michelle, went into his home and reported on his family situation. I've talked to Francisco about this too, and he says, he's not like a big nightlife guy at all. He was pretty calm family lifestyle for a young, famous guy in New York, and he keeps his circle pretty tight, he's told me, with people that he trusts, and just really does a good job of tuning out those kinds of off-field distractions that can hit you when you're that young and famous and at the center of attention. I think he does a nice job with keeping a pretty normal lifestyle as much as he can.
Yeah, absolutely. And Terry, that had to be an uncomfortable position for Carlos Mendoza to be in, but you know all about being a manager in New York. So how is Mendoza doing in his first month and a half?
I think he's done great. I really do. I think he's made some decisions, tough decisions. I mean, he likes to shuffle his players. He does like to use his bench, which really helps if you're a bench player, knowing that every night you might be in a big situation. He's showing that he trusts his players off the bench to come in and pinch hit late in the game, which I think really helps the motivation of those guys who are not everyday players. He's been accountable when things are tough. He stood up and said, "Yep, we need to play better. We're a better team than this." He's been accountable for that. He's made a tough decision. The last time he left Quintana in the game when everybody thought he was going to come out due to the analytics numbers and pitch counts and all this stuff, and he trusted the pitcher and left him in, although his next start wasn't very good. But you know what? He's gotten the players' trust, and that's huge in this town. He's answered the questions. He's accessible to the media, which you have to be in this town. I think he's done a great job.
Good, yeah, has some good feel on that stuff. But Andy, what's your pulse on Mendoza so far within the organization?
It's like he's been everything they hoped he'd been and then some. It's pretty remarkable watching somebody who's stepping into a moment and a job and a role that he's ready for and made for. And I knew this guy as a coach on the Yankees, and I thought he'd be good, but I didn't know how he would be when someone goes from a number 2 to a number 1. You just don't know how that's going to look and feel. Sometimes people get tight. Seen that happen to people before in the game. This guy got more comfortable. And, in fact, being at Yankee Stadium last night, there was a Yankee official was like, hey, is Mendy doing as well over there as it looks from a distance? Everyone is rooting for this guy, and everyone is very impressed. So this has been such a slam dunk success story so far for him and for the Mets. And it's that simple.
That's awesome. And it's good. That's good. Let's switch gears here to Christian Scott. In his debut, he went 6 2/3 innings, only gave up 1 run, struck out 6. I want you both to fill in the blank here. Christian Scott is the best Mets pitcher since blank. Terry, you go first.
Well, after one start, I'd probably say the best Mets pitcher since Steven Matt's first start, who came in and absolutely pitched brilliantly against the Cincinnati Reds. But we called him up and he dominated 2 games in a row, and so Scott would be a guy that of the recent guys that I saw, he'd probably be the next dominant guy.
Andy?
Christian Scott's the best Mets pitcher since the beginning of time. Better even than Tom Seaver. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
If you listen, you think the reaction to these things obviously go a little wild. I think it was an unbelievably impressive debut. But I'm going to answer that question with he's the best Mets pitcher since Luis Severino, because that's been the guy so far this year. And as Terry said, it's one start. That's not meant as a slight to Scott at all. But let's keep watching his starts. He's talented. He's poised. But I don't think it does a player any good to put more hype on them than they're naturally going to get from a dynamic debut. And he's not any more accomplished. In fact, he's the least accomplished of anyone in that rotation, even Adrian Hauser, who was just bumped from the rotation. So I think he's going to get there, but he is where he is right now.
Way to keep him humble. Give him something to strive for. Okay, so Harrison Bader was quoted saying that he was bothered by his reduced role, saying that it's not what he expected. And Andy, to start the season, it really did seem like he was going to be the everyday center fielder. So do you know why he's had more days off lately?
Well, Tyrone Taylor's been really good. They have some outfield depth and some options where you can move Brandon Nimmo around depending on what they want to do in the infield. Obviously, moving McNeil to left has been something that Mendoza's done. So, Harrison Bader hasn't hit enough in his career to be someone who's right there at ink in your lineup who's an everyday player. He's obviously an elite defender and a good hitter. But this is the way that Mendoza's decided to do it, and it's that simple.
Terry, as a manager, and you hear or see a report like this, how does this impact your thoughts on a specific player's playing time?
Well, there's no question with what we just talked about, what Mendoza's done so far. I'm sure he's called Harrison in, sat him down, and say, "Hey, here's what we're going to do. We're looking for a little more offense in our lineup right now. We're not swinging the bats like we're capable of. We can't have opens. We can't have spots that are outs. And so, we're going to maneuver it a little bit, try to find some offensive weapons, which means you might lose some playing time. And you know what? And you can say what you want, but you know what? There's one thing about saying you expected something else. Well, go play better. I mean, it's very simple. I remember talking to Wilmer Flores one day, and he talked about getting some at bats, and I said, you know what? If you start hitting, you start getting those extra at bats. You know what? The next time you walk into my office, you're going to want a day off. So the idea is you got to play better, and that's all. And so I'm sure Harrison, I don't know him very well, but I know one thing. I know he's a hard worker. I know he's had some health issues. He probably feels the fact that he feels good, he's healthy. He's a little frustrated, but you know what? Turn it into a motivation that you're not. You know what? When you get back in there, that you're not coming out of the lineup. And there's no other way to explain it than that for me.
Yeah, I think
about the lineup too. And sorry, Michelle, but what I want to add is that Bader in that story made a comment like, "Well, I don't know who's making the lineup." I'll tell him who's making the lineup. It's Carlos Mendoza. I mean, but David Stern doesn't believe that a front office should make a lineup. So the idea that it'd be this mystery over I don't know who's making these decisions with the Mets, it's very clear. I mean, Mendoza's getting data from the front office and information that can influence you in subtle ways, but he makes the lineup. So clear that up for Harrison right there.
In case he's watching. Hi, Harrison.
Hi, Harrison.
I do want to talk about David Stearns now that you brought him up, though. He's made a ton of moves to fill the last 2 spots in the bullpen, calling guys up, DFAing guys, sending guys down, and it's working. So how do you evaluate the job that he's done kind of mixing guys in, Andy?
Well, most of those things he did were planned. Like you sign guys like Michael Tonkin and Johan Ramirez knowing that they're probably going to be DFA'd at some point. They did lose a couple relievers like Austin Adams that were really good in spring training that, as a result of some of these decisions. So the roster churn has cost them some guys maybe they wish they'd kept. They got jammed up a little with some rainouts and extra inning stuff early in the season, which caused more roster churn than they wanted. But it's been pretty much what they've planned. Maybe a little bit more losing guys. Like they didn't sign Tonkin to have him pitch for the Yankees by May. but I think mostly it's worked according to plan.
Terry, kind of going back to what Andy said about who's making the lineup, how much of a decision does the manager have versus Stearns have in this kind of decision making when it comes to the bullpen and roster moves?
Well, first of all, I don't know how David Stearns works. I knew one thing. I knew that Sandy Alderson had a feel for what we needed and what his thoughts were about who we could go get. There was no question. I didn't need to walk into his office and said, hey, we need another lefty or we need another righty. I never did. He knew. He was on top of all of that stuff. So I'm not sure. And maybe David goes down and talks to Carlos about, hey, look, do you like here's this guy and this guy. Who do you like? He may do that. I have no idea. But when I was there, I knew that no matter what we felt as a staff, that we had to have Sandy Alderson had already the same thoughts. So that stuff and that allowed me to worry about handling who was in that clubhouse instead of who's not in that clubhouse and go and get somebody. That was all him.
All right, let's take a little break from baseball now. We're going to bring in the king of SNY social media, Matt Spenley, to share what's been viral this week, coming off a fresh Game 2 Knicks victory as our resident Knicks fan in the office.
Michelle, you're too kind. Thank you. Okay, guys, I was at Game 2 last night at Madison Square Garden. Can you guys see? Here's me and my dad losing our minds after they won. So I have a couple questions for you guys. My first one is, Terry, for you, did you ever have any players that were big fans of other teams that would keep tabs? Because I know obviously the Knicks haven't really been good much recently, but was that ever something you experienced with any baseball teams you've been involved with?
I know we had some huge hockey fans. We had some guys, I had Jason Bay, was a Canadian guy. We had some other guys that were huge hockey fans. So they kind of really, watched the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'm not sure we had a lot of basketball fans, even though some of the guys think they were. I mean, I remember we had Tina Charles in one day, and Noah Syndergaard challenged her to a 5-on-5 with our pitching staff against, the WNBA. And I said, you do know you're getting in over your head, boys. I mean, so, but, at one time I was a huge NBA fan, huge. I grew up in Michigan. And I was a Pistons fan for years, and we just got drubbed until, the bad boys came along. And so I still kind of on the outside follow the NBA. So I'm really excited that the Knicks and, when Kenny Atchison was with the Nets, I was kind of a Nets guy because I really liked the job he did. So, but I think hockey grabbed a lot of our players more than the NBA.
All right. Fair enough, Terry. You're welcome aboard the Knicks bandwagon anytime. You're welcome. Andy, you've been watching any of the Knicks? You an NBA guy at all?
Matt, have you been reading my coverage? I'm at baseball games every freaking night. I wish it would be entertaining. No, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen 1 second of the Knicks playoff run or the Rangers. But from what I understand, people are more interested in it right now than what's going on at Yankee Stadium and Citi Field at the moment. It's captivating the city, isn't it?
There's certainly the moment to get back, because as you mentioned, we know what your coverage is. Let's shift gears, and then I'll let you guys get the rest of the show going here. So we have a question from Josh on YouTube is asking for Andy, with Peterson, Senga, McGill working their way back from injuries. How do you think the starting rotation might shift for the Mets? I know how these things go. They usually tend to play themselves out because pitchers go up, pitchers go down. But how do you kind of see the rotation playing out as those guys work their way back?
That's an interesting question. I think it's going to be a matter of attrition and potential injury. I don't think that now that Adrian Hauser's been demoted to the bullpen, it's hard to see him coming back with all these guys that are coming back in, obviously. I think Peterson probably has the most to prove right now because it's been longer since we've seen him. And that's somebody who is a little bit behind McGill, I think, health-wise, too. So these decisions are going to be decided by very recent performance and health when the opportunities arise and people are ready to be activated in terms of who's out, because no one's really calling.
Terry, it looks like we're dealing with technical difficulties here, but let's keep it moving because we were talking about who the Mets have upcoming. Andy's back now, so Andy, I'll pose you this question. Hey, what's up? Dealing with some no problem. All right, we're going to talk a bit about. Oh, well, now Andy's gone, and Michelle's. You guys were playing music with me. Okay. Talking about the Mets' upcoming schedule, who they have. The Braves are upcoming next. So we kind of know what's upcoming, who we have upcoming on the schedule. I'm vamping so you guys can have some time to get.
How's it going? How's your hosting debut going, Matt?
In social media and being in digital.
Well, you sound just fine to me. Very smoothly done.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. But as we are talking about Braves coming to town, what are you looking for in this series as the Mets welcome the Braves?
Well, I'm very interested to see how Scott acquits himself at Citi Field. That's going to be a big debut. Interested to see if Pete Alonso builds on what might have been a breakout performance. Interested to see if Lindor continues to hit. I expect he will, but with Pete, it's a little bit more recent, that apparent resurgence, so we'll see how that looks. And do the Mets find any way in season to figure out how to hold runners on better? That's a big thing.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, we are going to wrap this show a little early here. It is an off day, so we got plenty of stuff to do. Thank you so much for watching Mets Off Day Live. The next episode is going to be Thursday, May 23rd at 12 noon. For Terry, Collins, Andy Martino, I'm Michelle Margaux, and enjoy the rest of your off day.